I am Hercule Poirot. Welcome to my new mystery story.
The drawing room of Ashcombe Hall was a place of impeccable order. Persian carpets aligned with military precision, portraits of solemn ancestors gazing down with austere pride, and the faint aroma of beeswax polish lingering in the air. Yet on this particular September evening, all that order was shattered. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, matriarch of the ancient estate, lay slumped in a velvet armchair beneath the gilt-framed portrait of her late husband. Her teacup, delicate Sèvres porcelain, had toppled from her hand, spilling a pale stain into the carpet. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting restless shadows across her lifeless form. The household had gathered in confusion, each member as pale as the next. Sir Reginald Ashcombe, her son and heir, barked orders in a voice cracked by fear. His wife, Clara, dabbed at her eyes, but seemed more concerned with appearances than grief. A guest, Major Harrington, an old family friend, paced with soldierly agitation, muttering of doctors and inquiries. And then there was the butler. Hollow-eyed, his posture as rigid as the starched collar of his uniform, Mr. Mortlake stood by the doorway. His lips moved faintly as though in whispered prayer or something darker. He alone did not rush to the fallen lady, nor did he summon the servants. Instead, in a low voice that seemed torn from his very soul, he murmured, "I must confess, it was I." The words, barely audible, nonetheless sent a chill rippling through the assembled company. Sir Reginald spun on his heel. "What nonsense is this, Mortlake? You are raving." But the butler did not retract the statement. His expression was strange, unreadable, guilt, despair, or perhaps something far more elusive. He simply lowered his eyes and repeated, in the same hollow tone, "I must confess." Before further questions could be asked, Lady Eleanor's physician arrived, summoned by hurried servants. His examination confirmed what many already suspected. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe was quite dead. The cause was not immediately clear. Her heart had been delicate for years, yet the overturned tea suggested something more sinister. Poison, perhaps. The authorities were called, and the grand hall of Ashcombe became less a family home and more a theatre of suspicion. A butler's whispered confession, a sudden death in a house filled with wealth, history, and simmering resentments. Already the whispers of scandal were in motion. By the time dawn broke across the mist-shrouded grounds, Sir Reginald had sent a telegram in desperation. For such a perplexing matter, only one man would do. And so it was that Hercule Poirot, the fastidious little Belgian with his gleaming patent leather shoes and immaculately waxed moustaches, was on his way to Ashcombe Hall. Dawn brought a damp pearl light that made the stone lions at the gate look ghostly. The doctor had gone. The local constable posted 2 men in the hall, and Sir Reginald declared that no one should depart until matters were clarified. His voice shook and his gaze kept sliding to the velvet armchair. Mortlake, the butler who had whispered that confession, was kept in the morning room with a constable. Clara Ashcombe assumed command with practiced efficiency. Her face, pale and composed, betrayed only a tremor at the mouth. She ordered the staff to assemble in the long gallery, Mrs. Broom, the housekeeper, Mrs. Poole, the cook, Elsie, the maid, and Jonah Pike, the groundsman, mud on his cuffs. Major Harrington stood apart, hands behind his back. "Who prepared Lady Eleanor's tea?" Clara asked, and all eyes went to Elsie. "I laid the tray, ma'am," Elsie whispered, "but cook brewed it. Mortlake carried it in." Mrs. Poole sniffed. "Same as ever, only she'd taken to honey of late. Said it was kinder to her nerves." "Where is the honey kept?" Harrington asked. "In the cold pantry," Mrs. Broom replied. "Locked at night. Mortlake and I have keys." That stirred a murmur. 2 custodians, 2 keys, 1 whisper of guilt. Sir Reginald paced, his eyes straying to the closed morning-room door. Before the constable could take notes, Miss Lydia Vale, Lady Eleanor's companion and secretary, arrived with her notebooks clutched like a shield. A spare woman in her 30s, she had an ink stain on one finger and a cool, exact voice. Her ladyship was preparing a new codicil to her will, she said. We were to see Mr. Pember on Friday. She intended certain alterations. Clara's head turned. Alterations? Modest, Lydia said. Charitable bequests, and an annuity to a long-standing servant. Her gaze slid toward the morning-room door. Sir Reginald coloured. And this is the first I'm hearing of it. Her ladyship preferred to be satisfied before announcing her intention, Lydia replied. Jonah Pike coughed. Begging pardon, sir, but there's more. Last night I chased what I thought was a poacher near the East Wood. Weren't a poacher. A gent in a dark coat, moving quick toward the folly. He doubled back when he saw me. Harrington's eyes sharpened. Did you challenge him? I shouted. He melted into the hedges. Any callers yesterday? Clara asked. Miss Vale consulted her book. Mr. Pember telephoned at noon. The vicar's wife left a card, and a gentleman from the village petitioned for funds to repair the school roof, Mr. Daniel Keats. She saw him alone for 15 minutes. Keats, Sir Reginald repeated. Decent fellow. Decency stretches when money is tight, Harrington muttered. Clara pressed on. Mrs. Broom, is anything missing? The housekeeper hesitated. There is the pearl brooch, ma'am. Her ladyship wore it to dinner, and I cannot find it this morning. At that, Mrs. Poole crossed herself. Elsie began to weep. Sir Reginald swore. A dead matriarch, a confession, a vanished jewel, and a stranger in the hedgerow. Ashcombe Hall felt less like a monument to stability than a stage set for calamity. Constable Barnes, a stolid man with notebook, cleared his throat. No one leaves, he said. I'll take statements. He glanced at the door. I'll start with Mortlake. They found the butler as they had left him, upright, composed, eyes downcast. Barnes dismissed the footman and took a chair opposite. You've confessed, he said. To what, precisely? To negligence, Mortlake murmured. To a failure of duty. Did you poison your mistress? A pause. Then a tiny shake of the head. No. Then explain your words. On Tuesday night, by the library corridor, I heard her speaking with a man, Mortlake said. She was distressed. She said, I will not be blackmailed. Silence gathered. Who was with her? I could not see, Mortlake replied. The door was shut. A man's voice, low. Why did you not speak sooner? I hoped it would be resolved, Mortlake said. Her ladyship put matters to rights. I did not wish to spread scandal. That and... He stopped. And... She had promised me a letter this week, he said at last. A reference. I am to retire. I feared to imperil it. She had served this house. I had served her. I chose discretion. Now she is dead. Barnes regarded him, then rose. In the corridor, Sir Reginald waited. Clara stood beside him. Miss Vale lingered at a tactful distance. Inspector Japp is unavailable, Sir Reginald said. But another gentleman has agreed to come at once. You may have heard of him. Barnes lifted an eyebrow. Hercule Poirot, Clara said, a note entering her voice. Between relief and apprehension. He will arrive by the afternoon train. At this, the house exhaled quietly. The staff drifted to their stations. Yet beneath the lowered voices, the currents of fear ran strong. A blackmailer in the library, a stranger in the hedges, a missing brooch, and a butler who confessed to the wrong sin. Ashcombe Hall waited for its order to be restored, or for its secrets to be laid bare. The afternoon light slanted across the lawns of Ashcombe Hall, gilding the stone facade and picking out every climbing rose that clung to the balustrades. Inside, the atmosphere was far from golden. Servants moved in hushed procession, the clink of china subdued. footsteps muted on carpeted floors. Constable Barnes had done what little he could. Notes taken, movements accounted for, yet nothing sat comfortably in his ledger. The butler's strange half-confession loomed like a shadow over every account, and the whisper of blackmail curled at the edge of every conversation. All waited, with unease and curiosity, for the arrival of the Belgian detective. It was just before 4 when the crunch of wheels upon the gravel drive brought faces to the windows. A motorcar, trim and shining, rolled to a dignified halt. Out stepped a small man of impeccable neatness, his mustaches glinting. With waxed precision, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dust of travel. His bowler hat sat squarely, and in one hand he carried a valise so polished that it mirrored the autumn light. Hercule Poirot paused, surveying Ashcombe Hall with his head tilted ever so slightly, as though measuring its symmetry. Satisfied, or perhaps intrigued, he mounted the steps. Sir Reginald met him at the door, all strained courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming on such short notice. This house, well, you will understand soon enough." "I understand already," Poirot replied softly, stepping into the hall. His gaze swept the panelled walls, the arrangement of chairs, even the vase upon the console. "It is a house of order, and yet within there is disarray. That is why you require me, n'est-ce pas?" Clara greeted him with a hand that trembled faintly, though she quickly withdrew it. Major Harrington gave a sharp nod, stiff with military brusqueness. Lydia Vale inclined her head with measured coolness, notebook still clutched like armor. The servants had been dismissed, though Elsie was glimpsed at the stairwell, eyes wide before Mrs. Broom drew her away. Poirot set down his valise. "I must begin at once. Where is the room where the tragedy occurred?" Sir Reginald led him to the drawing-room. The armchair remained, though Lady Eleanor had been carried upstairs. The tea service had been tidied, but Poirot gestured sharply for nothing more to be moved. He bent over the carpet, examining the pale stain with eyes that missed nothing. He touched the overturned cup with a gloved finger, raised it delicately, and replaced it with almost reverent care. "You have had the tea analyzed?" he asked. "Not yet," Barnes admitted. "We sent for the village chemist, but he is slow to come." Poirot pursed his lips. "Patience is a virtue, yes, but one must not confuse patience with negligence. Already time passes, and with time, clarity may be lost." He turned. "Tell me, who brought the tray?" "Elsie laid it. Cook brewed it. Mortlake carried it," Clara said. "Always the same arrangement." "Always," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "And yet this day, it ends in death. Curious." His eyes rested briefly on Clara, who shifted under his gaze. Then, without another word, he asked to see Mortlake. The butler was brought from the morning room. His expression remained controlled, though shadows darkened the hollows of his eyes. Poirot regarded him in silence for a long moment, then stepped forward. "Monsieur Mortlake, you have said, I must confess." "To what, mon ami?" Mortlake hesitated, then repeated the story of overhearing Lady Eleanor with a man in the library corridor. Poirot listened intently, his head inclined, fingers pressed together in his familiar fashion. "She used the word blackmail," Poirot said softly. "A strong word. And you could not see the man?" "No, monsieur. Only a low voice." "And you believed it was your failure, your negligence, to remain silent?" Mortlake inclined his head. "Yes, I should have spoken." Poirot tapped one finger against his chin. "And yet, if she were indeed blackmailed, then there is another question. By whom, and for what?" He turned. "Sir Reginald, may I see the library?" The library was cool and dim, oak shelves rising to a carved ceiling. Poirot walked slowly along the carpet, pausing at the writing desk where papers lay stacked. He examined the blotter, the pen, the wastebasket. He lifted a crumpled sheet and smoothed it with delicate care. It was only a fragment, yet the words were plain, Cannot endure this secrecy. Danger to the family. Must act soon. The signature was torn away. Poirot studied it a long moment before replacing it. "Ah," he murmured. "The hand of unease, the whisper of danger. And someone sought to destroy it, but not completely. A clue half hidden is a clue revealed." Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably. "You think this relates to the codicil? To the will?" "Perhaps." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "But wills are simple things compared with the complexity of the human heart. It is there one must search." As he spoke, the door opened and Jonah Pike shuffled in, cap in hand. "Beggin' pardon, sir," he said, "but I thought you should know. This morning, down by the East Wood, I found Summit." From his pocket he produced a handkerchief, within which lay a small brooch, pearls set in gold, one clasp bent as though wrenched. Clara gasped. "The brooch! Mamma's brooch! It was missing." Poirot took it carefully. "Where, precisely, did you find this, Monsieur Pike?" "In the grass, sir, not 10 yards from where I saw that gent last night." There was a stir at this. Harrington stepped forward. "You see? An intruder, caught by Pike, fled through the hedges, dropped the brooch. No mystery at all." Poirot raised a hand. "No mystery. Ah, but consider. If he fled, why take only the brooch and leave untouched the other jewels within? Why whisper threats of blackmail? Why choose poison when theft was sufficient?" His mustaches quivered. "Non, Major, the matter is not so simple." He placed the brooch on the desk, his eyes thoughtful. Then he turned to Lydia Vale. "Mademoiselle, you were her secretary. You must know. What secrets might Lady Eleanor have held that could be worth blackmail?" Lydia's lips tightened. "Secrets belong to the dead. I will not speculate." "But Poirot will speculate," he said gently. "And more than that, he will deduce. For already the pieces arrange themselves. A whispered confession, a missing jewel, a fragment of letter, and the word blackmail. Each is a thread, and from threads one may weave the tapestry entire." The room fell silent, heavy with expectation. Poirot smoothed his mustache, satisfied. "I will speak to each of you in turn, but remember, lies are like footprints in soft earth. They remain, however lightly trodden, and Hercule Poirot, he always sees the footprints." Poirot's announcement that lies left their footprints lingered in the room like a faint, chilling draught. No one moved for several moments. Clara clasped her hands so tightly the knuckles whitened, while Sir Reginald busied himself with a box of cigars, though he did not light one. Major Harrington remained stiff and defiant, jaw squared as if daring anyone to question his integrity. Lydia Vale's eyes flicked downward, carefully veiling whatever emotion stirred within. Poirot let the silence grow, for silence itself often pressed truth to the surface. When he finally spoke, his tone was light, almost conversational, yet every word carried weight. "We shall proceed logically, step by step. Each of you, one at a time, shall give me a complete account of your doings yesterday. Not merely the obvious movements. Oh no. The smallest detail may prove significant, and you will forgive me if I interrupt with questions. It is my way, n'est-ce pas?" He began with Sir Reginald, who set down the cigar box reluctantly. "After luncheon, I was in my study," Reginald said. "I spent most of the afternoon reviewing estate accounts. Lady Eleanor came in briefly to request a cheque for the church roof repairs. I signed it, then returned to my ledgers. Later, I walked with Major Harrington on the west terrace until the dinner bell." Poirot inclined his head. "And at dinner, you observed nothing unusual in your mother's manner?" "She was a little distracted, but that was not uncommon. Her health has been delicate these past years. After dinner, she retired early. I joined Harrington in the billiards room until near midnight." "Just so," Poirot murmured. "And you, Major?" Harrington bristled at being addressed as though under suspicion. I corroborate Sir Reginald's statement. We played 3 games. Reginald won 2 of them. Hardly a cover for some sinister plot, eh? Punctual records of victories. Always useful, Poirot said mildly. He turned to Clara. She raised her chin. I spent the afternoon in the conservatory, overseeing the gardeners. Lady Eleanor joined me for a short while. She admired the new orchids. Then I prepared correspondence for the London dressmaker and retired upstairs before dinner. I came down again for the meal. Afterward, I returned to my rooms. I did not see her ladyship again until the dreadful moment. Poirot's eyes rested on her a fraction longer than courtesy demanded, then shifted to Lydia Vale. I accompanied Lady Eleanor most of the day, Lydia said, her voice controlled. She dictated several letters in the morning. After luncheon, we reviewed documents related to the codicil. She instructed me to prepare a draft. Toward evening, she dismissed me to rest before dinner. I retired to my rooms and worked privately on the notes. I did not see her again. Poirot nodded slowly. And Monsieur Mortlake, we have spoken already, yet I will hear it again in the presence of all. The butler, summoned from the doorway, bowed slightly. In the afternoon I oversaw deliveries. At tea I carried the tray. At dinner I served as usual. Later I made my rounds, ensured all was secure, and retired to my pantry. I heard no disturbance until the cry when her ladyship was found. Merci, Poirot said. He steepled his fingers, considering them all. Now, what strikes me as most curious is not what is said, but what is omitted. Each of you remembers times, activities, even trifles. Yet none of you speaks of the library, save Mortlake, and he only of overhearing. And yet here, in this very room, there is evidence of unease, of danger. He tapped the desk where the crumpled note lay. It tells me that Lady Eleanor feared something imminent, something not distant, but close. The words drew a faint gasp from Elsie, who had slipped into the hall unnoticed. Mrs. Broom tugged her back sharply, but Poirot beckoned her forward. Come, petite, you were near your mistress yesterday. What do you recall? The maid hesitated, eyes darting to Clara, then back to Poirot. Only this, sir. When I helped her ladyship dress after dinner, she asked me whether letters once burnt could ever be found again. I said no, not unless someone kept a copy. She looked troubled and said nothing more. Poirot gave a small nod of satisfaction. Voilà. That is important. Letters destroyed, or believed destroyed, and yet the fear remained. The company shifted uneasily. Reginald muttered something about melodrama, but Poirot ignored him. Instead, he requested to see Lady Eleanor's private writing desk upstairs. The group followed him reluctantly to her boudoir, where the desk stood by the window. Poirot examined every drawer with delicate precision. Within, he found orderly bundles of correspondence tied with ribbon, accounts neatly stacked, and one small locked box. Lydia produced a key, claiming it was for financial papers. When opened, it contained a sheaf of cancelled checks and a sealed envelope addressed only with a single initial. D. Who is D? Poirot asked, lifting it carefully. No one answered at once. Then Clara said quietly, Daniel Keats. He came yesterday, remember? The schoolmaster. Poirot's brows lifted. Ah, Monsieur Keats. The man who saw her privately. And Lady Eleanor promised funds for the school roof, did she not? Yet this envelope, sealed and ready, addressed only with his initial, curious, most curious. We must speak to him. At that moment, Constable Barnes entered hurriedly. Monsieur Poirot, we've had word from the chemist. The tea was laced with digitalis. Strong dose. Enough to kill. A ripple went through the room. Clara pressed a hand to her lips. Harrington swore under his breath. Lydia Vale's hand tightened on her notebook until her knuckles whitened. Poirot placed the envelope gently back in the box, his expression grave yet serene. So it is as I thought. Poison and not chance. Murder, mes amis. Murder most deliberate. The question is not only who had the opportunity, but who had the heart cold enough to commit it. He allowed the silence to stretch again, watching each face with calm, penetrating eyes. Then he said softly, "I will see Mr. Daniel Keats tomorrow, and until then you will forgive Hercule Poirot if he asks that no one stray too far from Ashcombe Hall. For the murderer is here, of that I have no doubt." The declaration that Lady Eleanor had been murdered by poison hung over Ashcombe Hall like a thundercloud, darkening every corridor and choking each conversation to a whisper. Dinner that evening was a strained affair, more a formality than nourishment. Poirot, seated at the head of the table where the mistress of the house once presided, ate little and spoke less, though his eyes missed nothing. Clara toyed with her fork, her appetite quite vanished, while Sir Reginald drank more than was his habit, the clink of glass against china punctuating the silence. Major Harrington attempted once or twice to break the tension with remarks on politics and the unsettled state of Europe, but his voice carried a hollow quality, as though he too felt the futility of distraction. Lydia Vale excused herself early, claiming fatigue, and Mortlake hovered in the shadows, his face impassive, though the muscles at his jaw twitched as he refilled glasses with mechanical precision. After the meal, Poirot requested that everyone remain in the drawing-room. Constable Barnes stationed himself discreetly near the door. A low fire smouldered on the hearth, casting a wavering glow that made the ancestral portraits look more accusing than ever. Poirot took his position at the center of the room, his small frame commanding attention by the quiet certainty of his manner. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we now know it was poison that carried Lady Eleanor from this world. Digitalis. Yes, it is most effective, and most cruel. But poison, you understand, is the weapon of cunning. It requires forethought, preparation, and a certain cold-blooded patience. It is not struck in the heat of passion. Non. It is administered quietly, in secret, with calm hands. Therefore we must ask ourselves, who among you has such patience? Who such opportunity?" No one spoke. Only the hiss of the logs and the faint ticking of the mantel clock answered. Poirot paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back, moustaches bristling. Let us return to the facts. The tea, prepared by cook, poured by Mortlake, carried upon a tray by Elsie, and finally placed before Lady Eleanor by Mortlake himself. Many hands, yes, and therefore many chances for interference. The honey, too, is suspicious. It was newly favoured by her ladyship. Who suggested it? "I believe Mamma read in a magazine that it calmed the nerves," Clara said, her voice subdued. "She asked for it of her own accord." "Just so. Yet where is the honey jar now?" Mrs. Broom was summoned. With a trembling hand, she produced the jar from the pantry. Poirot examined it closely, unscrewed the lid, and sniffed delicately. His brows rose. "It is tainted," he said quietly. "The poison is here. Not in the tea leaves. Ah, that is clever, très clever. For honey masks bitterness. It would pass unnoticed, even by one accustomed to her daily draught." He replaced the jar and looked round at the company. "We now know the method, but who had access to the honey?" The pantry was locked at night with 2 keys, one in the possession of Mrs. Broom, one in that of Mortlake. Mortlake bowed his head slightly. "That is true, monsieur, yet the pantry is not guarded in the day. Anyone might slip in." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, "and so we return to motive. Lady Eleanor was preparing a codicil to her will, yes? That is one motive. Money. But there is also blackmail, another motive. And finally, there is the brooch, perhaps theft. 3 motives, mes amis, all tangled together like threads. We must see which thread unravels the whole." Sir Reginald slammed his fist upon the arm of his chair. "This is intolerable. Do you mean to accuse us all in turn until one breaks down? We are not criminals." Ah, but one of you is, Poirot replied softly, with a look that pierced through bluster. Reginald subsided, muttering into his glass. Poirot allowed the tension to build before speaking again. Tomorrow, I will see Monsieur Daniel Keats. Tonight, however, I ask each of you to search your memories. Lies leave footprints, as I have said. Contradictions also leave their traces. Reflect, mes amis. Reflect carefully. The gathering broke reluctantly. Clara withdrew upstairs with a faint plea of headache, while Harrington stalked to the smoking room, muttering about foreigners meddling. Lydia Vale lingered only long enough to collect her notebook before gliding away. Reginald remained behind, staring at the embers until Mortlake discreetly guided him out. Poirot stood alone at the hearth, eyes half closed, his mind clearly arranging the puzzle. Later, in the quiet of the guest chamber assigned him, Poirot wrote several notes with his neat, precise hand, sealing one in an envelope for delivery to the village constable at dawn. Then, after brushing his mustaches and aligning his shoes perfectly at the bedside, he lay down. Sleep, however, did not come easily. At midnight, a cry shattered the silence. Poirot was on his feet at once, dressing gown about him, slippers upon his feet. He hurried into the corridor where servants and family alike converged, pale in the candlelight. From the far end came the source, Clara's chamber. Inside, she sat upon the bed, trembling violently, pointing to the open window. "I woke to see a figure," she gasped. "At the window, watching me. When I screamed, it fled." Poirot advanced, examined the sill, then the garden below. The night was heavy with mist, but the grass bore a darkened trail, flattened as though by hurried steps. He stooped, plucked a shred of fabric from a thorn bush just beneath the sill, and held it up to the lamplight. It was a scrap of dark cloth. "There has been another intrusion," he said gravely. "The same intruder, perhaps, who dropped the brooch near the east wood, or perhaps someone nearer who plays a dangerous double game." Clara buried her face in her hands. Harrington swore and demanded lanterns to search the grounds. Sir Reginald thundered about scandal and safety. Lydia Vale stood at the doorway, her expression unreadable, as if she absorbed every detail for later recall. Mortlake, summoned hastily, gazed upon the scene with haunted eyes, his lips moving again in that half-whispered prayer. Poirot pocketed the scrap of cloth. "Enough," he declared. "No one leaves this house tonight. Lock the doors, post watches if you must. The murderer grows restless, and that is always when mistakes are made. We must be vigilant." The group dispersed reluctantly, leaving Poirot at the window, peering into the mist where the gardens dissolved into shadow. He smoothed his moustache thoughtfully. "Ah," he murmured, "now the game begins in earnest, and soon, I think, the murderer will step too far." The mist still clung to the gardens when the household stirred again at dawn. Sleep had come fitfully, if at all, to those within Ashcombe Hall. Clara's scream had unsettled the servants. Whispers in the kitchen spoke of ghosts, of Lady Eleanor's spirit walking in anger. Poirot, however, dismissed such talk with a flick of his hand as he descended the main staircase, polished shoes gleaming even in the pale morning light. He had risen early, and though his frame was small, his step carried the quiet authority of one who already knew more than he revealed. Constable Barnes, weary-eyed from a night of watchfulness, met him in the hall. "No sign of the intruder, sir," he reported. "We searched the grounds with lanterns until nearly 3. Nothing but the broken trail you observed, leading as far as the hedge, then vanishing." Poirot nodded. "Yes, it is the way with intruders. They vanish when too much light is turned upon them. Yet, mon cher, the vanishing itself tells us something. A true outsider would have left heavier marks, no? A stranger, not knowing the grounds, would stumble, break twigs, leave footprints. But these traces, they are subtle, careful. This was no stranger. Barnes frowned. Then one of the household? Or one who knows the household well? Poirot replied. That distinction we must keep in mind. He drew the scrap of cloth from his pocket, studied it again, then returned it with care. Let us be patient. Today we meet Monsieur Keats, and perhaps the shadows will lessen. By mid-morning, Daniel Keats arrived. A tall, thin man in his late 30s, he had the pale complexion of a scholar and the slightly stooped shoulders of one accustomed to poring over books. His suit was clean but threadbare, his cuffs frayed, his shoes polished yet worn. He greeted Poirot with a respectful bow, though his eyes flickered nervously to Sir Reginald, who stood with arms folded like a judge awaiting testimony. "Mr. Keats," Poirot began, his tone courteous but direct. "Yesterday you visited Lady Eleanor. You were alone with her for 15 minutes. You will be so good as to tell us what passed between you." Keats clasped his hands together, speaking slowly, as though weighing every word. "I came to ask for funds, Monsieur Poirot. The roof of the village school is crumbling and the children suffer in winter. Lady Eleanor had always been generous. She listened kindly. She said she would consider the request, but she also asked me questions. Strange questions. She wanted to know if I'd kept certain letters." "Letters?" Poirot's brows lifted. "What letters, monsieur?" Keats swallowed. "From years ago, when I was a tutor to Sir Reginald in his youth. Lady Eleanor and I corresponded for a time. Innocent matters, books, ideas. She feared they might be misinterpreted." Reginald gave a sharp exclamation, but Poirot raised a hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. And you, Keats, you did keep these letters." "I did," Keats admitted, shamefaced. "Not for gain, but, well, they were her words, and I treasured them. I never thought to use them against her. She spoke of blackmail, but it was not by me. I swear it." Poirot studied him, mustaches twitching. "You still have them?" "Yes. Locked away at the school. I can fetch them if you wish. Later, perhaps. For now, we take you at your word. But consider, monsieur, someone knew of these letters. Someone who saw in them the seed of scandal, that someone pressed Lady Eleanor, and when she resisted, turned to poison." Keats paled, shaking his head. "I never. Poirot inclined his head. "We shall see. For now, you may go. But do not stray far." When Keats departed, Sir Reginald burst out, "This is outrageous. To think my mother's name linked with that man, his kind, always grasping, always looking for advantage." "Perhaps," Poirot said mildly. "Or perhaps not. Prejudice, my dear Sir Reginald, can blind us to truth. Let us not rush." It was then Lydia Vale spoke, her voice calm but edged. "Monsieur Poirot, may I remind you of the codicil? Lady Eleanor intended an annuity for a servant. She did not tell me the name, but she wrote it on a slip of paper. When I looked this morning, it was gone." "Gone?" Poirot repeated. "That is very curious indeed." He fixed his gaze upon Mortlake, who stood silent at the back of the room. "Monsieur, do you know for whom the annuity was intended?" Mortlake's eyes flickered, but he answered steadily, "I could not say, monsieur." Poirot did not press further. Instead, he asked for the household ledgers, and in due time, Mrs. Broom brought them. Leafing through with care, Poirot noted the meticulous entries, the signatures, the small outlays. Then he paused, tapping one page lightly. A check cashed last week, for a considerable sum. Made out to cash, not to a name. Who authorized this? Sir Reginald frowned. "I did not." Clara, called from the conservatory, shook her head. "Not I." The signature was Eleanor's own, but Poirot's eye was sharp. "It is genuine," he murmured, "yet perhaps written under pressure. Blackmail, yes. Someone received money already, but not enough. And so they pressed harder. When she would not yield, death." The silence was heavy. Each face showed unease, some in anger, others in fear. Poirot allowed the silence to work upon them before speaking again, his voice soft but firm. You see, the picture formed slowly, piece by piece. The poison in the honey, the brooch dropped in flight, the letters kept by Monsieur Keats, the vanished slip of paper. Each is a fragment. Soon they will assemble. And then, mes amis, there will be nowhere left to hide. At that moment, a maid entered, trembling, her hands clutching a folded paper. This was found, monsieur, under the carpet in Lady Eleanor's boudoir. Poirot took it gently. It was half a note, torn and crumpled, written in a hand not Lady Eleanor's. If you do not comply, it read, the world shall know, the past will not stay buried. Poirot looked up, eyes alight with grim satisfaction. Ah, he said softly. The blackmailer speaks at last, and now we are very close indeed. Poirot held the torn note between two fingers, as though it were some delicate relic, his eyes narrowing in thought. The others leaned forward, though none dared speak. The words were stark, the threat unmistakable, and the implication that someone within these very walls had wielded it sent a tremor through the air. Poirot laid the fragment gently upon the table, smoothing the creases. Observe, he said quietly. The phrasing is blunt, without flourish. A writer of little imagination, but of strong intent. Not the language of sentiment, but of coercion. The past will not stay buried. An interesting choice. Whose past, I wonder? He looked from face to face. Reginald's colour was high, Clara's lips pressed to a thin line, Lydia's expression coolly guarded, Harrington's brows furrowed in something between indignation and unease. Mortlake alone remained still, his features carved like stone. Poirot let the silence drag, knowing silence drew confessions faster than questions. At last, Harrington burst out, "This is outrageous. To suspect us of blackmail of all things, what possible gain could any of us have had?" "Gain," Poirot murmured, "is not always measured in pounds and shillings, mon cher. Sometimes it is safety, sometimes reputation, sometimes revenge. Each of you, I think, has something you would not wish exposed." Clara gave a quick, nervous laugh, brittle as glass. "Surely you cannot believe we all hounded poor Eleanor into her grave." "Not all, madame," Poirot said softly. "Only one, but that one hides among you now." He turned suddenly to Lydia. "Mademoiselle Vale, you are the secretary. You see every paper, every note. Does this handwriting seem familiar?" Lydia glanced at the note briefly, then shook her head. "It is not Lady Eleanor's, nor mine. Beyond that I cannot say." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "You answered too quickly, perhaps. But no matter. We shall see." He tucked the fragment into an envelope and slipped it into his pocket. Then, with a decisive air, he said, "I must inspect Lady Eleanor's room again, thoroughly. There is something still concealed there, I am certain." The party moved upstairs reluctantly. The boudoir lay quiet, curtains drawn against the grey morning. Poirot moved with slow precision, touching nothing until his eyes had measured every detail. He bent to the carpet where the note had been found, then straightened suddenly and turned to the writing desk once more. He pulled open a shallow drawer, tapped lightly along the inner panel, and with a delicate pressure, slid free a false back. Inside lay a second envelope, sealed and marked with the same solitary initial. D. Poirot held it up triumphantly. Ah, our mysterious D again. But perhaps now he will speak more clearly. He broke the seal. Within lay a single sheet, written in a different hand from the threatening note. "To Lady Eleanor," it began, "I beg you to reconsider. Silence will only make matters worse. If you persist, all may be lost." It was unsigned. The group pressed closer. Clara gave a little gasp. Surely that proves it was Daniel Keats. The initial, the warning. Who else could it be? Ah, but observe. Poirot said, wagging a finger. "This hand is neat, careful, with flourishes at the capitals." The threatening note, by contrast, was blunt, cramped, written without elegance. Two different writers. Mes amis. Therefore, two different players in this game. One who begged, one who threatened. And between them, Lady Eleanor caught like a bird in a net. The implication rippled through the company. Harrington muttered darkly about intrigues. Reginald's scowl deepened. Clara pressed a hand to her throat as though her breath was stifled. Mortlake, silent still, lowered his gaze. Poirot tucked the letter away. "So we have at least two correspondents, the supplicant and the blackmailer. Whether they are allies or rivals, that remains to be seen." Barnes cleared his throat nervously. "And what of the intruder last night, sir? Do you think it was this blackmailer prowling about?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied. "Or perhaps the blackmailer sat quietly in this very room while we searched the gardens for shadows." His eyes swept them all with quiet certainty, and more than one face paled. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Broom entered, her hands wringing in agitation. "Begging pardon, sir," she said to Poirot, "but something else has gone missing. The household accounts book. It was in my keeping yesterday, but this morning, gone." Poirot's eyes lit up with a spark of triumph. "Just as I expected. The thief grows reckless. First a brooch, now a ledger. It is not theft for gain, but theft for concealment. There is something in those accounts that must not be seen." Reginald swore under his breath. Clara whispered a prayer. Harrington strode toward the door as though ready to ransack the house himself. Poirot, however, remained calm, smoothing his moustache with delicate fingers. "Patience, mes amis. Already the pattern forms." The blackmailer demanded, the supplicant pleaded, Lady Eleanor resisted, and the poison was used. But the truth is more subtle. It lies not only in the letters and the honey, but in the psychology, in the very nature of each one of you. Soon it will reveal itself. Already I see the outline. Soon I shall see the face. His words fell like a quiet hammer. The household dispersed slowly, uneasily, leaving Poirot once more at the desk. The hidden drawer opened before him, the faint scent of lavender clinging to the air. He tapped the wood gently, deep in thought. Then, very softly, he murmured, "Yes, the face is almost visible, and when it is, the mask will fall." Poirot remained seated at the writing desk long after the others had gone, his fingertips resting lightly upon the polished wood as though he might draw truth from its grain. The missing ledger troubled him. It was not an object one stole for profit, but for silence. He replayed in his mind the scene in the drawing-room, the faces of each suspect as the letter was revealed, and the precise shade of fear that flickered, quickly hidden, across more than one pair of eyes. Fear, he knew, was the most eloquent confession. The day passed under a veil of unease. Sir Reginald paced the halls with restless agitation, his steps echoing on the marble tiles. Clara withdrew to her chambers and emerged only for meals, her complexion pale, her movements quick and nervous. Harrington grew irritable, snapping at servants, muttering of wasted time. Lydia Vale continued her calm efficiency, making notes in her neat hand, but Poirot noticed the frequency with which her gaze strayed to the doors and windows, as though expecting them to betray her. Mortlake performed his duties with stoic composure, though his hands trembled slightly whenever he poured a glass. Each betrayed themselves in some manner, yet none in a way that Poirot could yet call proof. It was late afternoon when Constable Barnes entered with a cautious knock, a folded paper, in his hand. "Found this, sir," he said, "tucked in the hedge where the intruder fled last night. Might have been dropped." Poirot unfolded the paper. It was no letter this time, but a page torn from the very ledger now missing. The entry was clear, a payment of £500, authorized by Lady Eleanor, withdrawn in cash. No recipient named. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Bon, he murmured. The thief tears a page and drops it. Carelessness, or perhaps desperation. £500, a large sum, especially when paid to no one. Who here has need of such a sum, and why conceal it? That is what we must discover. The household was summoned once more. They gathered with evident reluctance in the library, the air thick with tension. Poirot laid the torn page upon the desk. Voila, a fragment of the missing ledger. Lady Eleanor authorized a withdrawal of £500. Tell me, mes amis, who can explain this? There was silence. Reginald shifted uncomfortably. Clara looked down at her folded hands. Harrington scowled. Lydia's pen tapped once against her notebook, and Mortlake's face was unreadable. No one? Poirot said softly. Then we must consider motives. £500 could secure silence, could purchase loyalty, or could erase indiscretion. Someone received it. Someone fears we shall learn who. At that, Reginald burst out, "You mustn't think it was me. My accounts are open to scrutiny. If I needed funds, I would ask openly." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet you gain most from your mother's will. Such a payment might not be to your advantage at all. Perhaps instead it endangered you." Reginald colored, but said no more. Poirot turned to Clara. "And you, madam? A lady has many expenses. Gowns, jewels, the household. Could you have requested such a sum?" Clara's eyes flashed. "I would never deceive my mother-in-law. I had all I required." "Perhaps," Poirot murmured, "and yet dissatisfaction sometimes hides behind elegance." Harrington gave a derisive snort. "This is nonsense. Eleanor was a proud woman. If she paid anyone, it was to silence some fool threatening her name. That is plain enough." "Indeed," Poirot said, "and you, Major, were often her companion. Did you never overhear her speak of such a threat?" Harrington hesitated too long before shaking his head. "Never." Poirot noted the hesitation, but pressed no further. Instead, he turned to Lydia. "Mademoiselle Vale, you prepared the codicil. You examined her accounts. Surely you saw this withdrawal." Lydia's lips tightened. "Yes. She asked me to note it and say nothing. I obeyed her instructions." "Did she say to whom it was given?" "No." Poirot studied her calmly. "And you did not ask? A secretary as careful as yourself, yet you asked nothing." She met his gaze without flinching. "It was not my place." Poirot's eyes lingered on her a moment, then moved at last to Mortlake. "And you, monsieur? As butler, you must have known. £500 cannot vanish from a household without the staff whispering." Mortlake's eyes flickered, but his voice was steady. "Her ladyship trusted me, monsieur. I did not question her actions." "Ah, toujours la discrétion," Poirot said softly. "Yet sometimes discretion conceals guilt." The tension rose until even Barnes shifted uneasily. Poirot let it crest, then said, "Very well. For now, we do not know who received the money. But we will know soon, I promise you. The truth has a way of pushing through the cracks." He dismissed them, though the unease did not fade. Clara clutched Reginald's arm as they left. Harrington muttered of outrage. Lydia walked out with quiet composure. Mortlake bowed and retreated into shadow. Poirot remained by the desk, fingertips resting on the torn page. Night drew over Ashcombe Hall once more. The lamps were lit, the curtains drawn, yet the house seemed restless, haunted by its own secrets. Poirot retired to his room, but he did not sleep. Instead, he sat by the window, gazing into the mist, waiting. His patience was rewarded near midnight. A faint creak disturbed the silence. Poirot slipped from his chair, moving noiselessly to the door. He opened it a fraction and saw a figure gliding down the corridor, a lantern shielded in one hand. The figure paused outside the library, glanced swiftly around, then slipped inside. Poirot followed, silent as a cat. Through the narrow crack of the door, He watched as the intruder bent to the desk, withdrawing a bundle of papers from beneath the false back of a drawer. The lantern's glow revealed the face, pale, tense, every line drawn with fear and resolve. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He pushed the door open. "Ah," he said quietly. "So it is you. At last, the mask begins to slip." The figure froze, caught in the circle of lamplight, the stolen papers trembling in their hands. The truth, Poirot knew, was very close now. The intruder's breath caught audibly as Poirot stepped fully into the library, closing the door behind him with a quiet click. The lantern shook in the culprit's hand, casting long, trembling shadows across the shelves. The papers they clutched seemed to burn against their fingers, proof of their desperation. For several moments, neither spoke. Poirot simply regarded them with calm, unblinking eyes, the faintest quirk at the corner of his lips betraying no triumph, only certainty. "Sit, if you please," he said gently, gesturing toward a chair near the desk. "There is no need for theatrics. The little grey cells, they are already awake, and they have pointed to you." Slowly, with a stiff reluctance, Lydia Vale lowered herself into the chair. The lantern rested on the table now, its light revealing the sheen of perspiration at her temple, the rigid line of her jaw. The bundle of papers she had tried to retrieve lay before her, half tugged from the secret drawer Poirot had left earlier. "You," she said, her voice low but steady, "were supposed to be asleep." Poirot inclined his head. "Eh bien, mademoiselle, it is never wise to suppose with Hercule Poirot. I knew the missing ledger must tempt someone back to its hiding place. The guilty one always returns to the scene, drawn as irresistibly as the moth to the flame." Her lips pressed together, though she did not deny it. Poirot stepped forward, carefully lifting the bundle. The top sheet bore Lady Eleanor's unmistakable hand. "Ah," he murmured, scanning the lines. "Letters. Not of affection, as I might have suspected, but of accounts. Here she notes disbursements, small gifts, payments to the staff, and... the reference for you, Mademoiselle Vale. She promised to provide for you after her death." Lydia's composure cracked for the first time. Her shoulders sagged. "Yes, she intended to leave me independent, no longer reliant on the whims of employers. She said she would see to it in her codicil, but then she hesitated, always hesitated, as if afraid her family would object. I feared—" She broke off, then looked up at him sharply. "But I did not kill her." Poirot spread his hands. "Perhaps not, but you concealed, you tampered, you took away what you feared others would discover. That makes you culpable, though not necessarily of murder. Tell me, why steal the ledger page? Why hide the letters?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they showed me to be a beneficiary. I knew how it would look. I thought, if I destroyed them, suspicion would turn elsewhere." Poirot's eyes softened. "The instinct of self-preservation, yes. But sometimes, mademoiselle, by trying to shield oneself, one becomes more entangled. Yet I believe you when you say you did not poison your mistress. For poison, it is an act of calculation, not of panic. And you, in panic, acted clumsily." She drew a sharp breath, half in protest, half in relief. "Then who?" Poirot tapped the papers thoughtfully. "That is what we are drawing near to, is it not? But come, we must not stage the revelation here in shadows. The morning the company assembled, that will be the time. Hercule Poirot does not whisper his conclusions in the dark." He gathered the bundle neatly, locked it once more in the drawer, and pocketed the key. "You will return to your room, Mademoiselle Vale. Say nothing. Tomorrow you shall hear the truth with all the rest." She rose, defeated but oddly composed, and with one last glance at him, departed silently. Poirot remained alone, the faint ticking of the clock marking the hours of the night. He stood motionless, his mind arranging and rearranging the pieces of the puzzle. The letters, the missing brooch, the poisoned honey. The blackmail notes, the vanished slip of paper from the codicil, all threads weaving into one tapestry. The pattern was almost complete. At dawn, Poirot requested that the household assemble once more in the drawing-room. They gathered reluctantly, yet curiosity pulled at them more strongly than fear. Reginald, heavy-eyed from another sleepless night, stood by the mantel with an air of irritation. Clara, pale but carefully dressed, sat rigidly, hands clasped in her lap. Harrington paced, sharp movements betraying impatience. Mortlake remained by the door, the image of dignity, though his gaze never lifted from the carpet. Lydia, composed once more, took her seat quietly, her notebook unopened before her. Poirot entered last, immaculate as ever, though those who looked closely saw the gleam of purpose in his eyes. He bowed slightly. "Mes amis, the hour has come. We have traveled through confusion, suspicion, unease. Now the little grey cells are satisfied. They see the pattern clearly." No one spoke, though breaths seemed held. Poirot allowed the silence to deepen, then began. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe did not die by chance, nor by her own weakness. She was murdered with poison in her honey, that we know. But who placed it there? Who stood most to gain from her silence? Who feared exposure or desired advantage? His gaze swept them. Mademoiselle Vale last night sought to conceal letters that named her as beneficiary. She feared suspicion, but her fear was not guilt of murder. No, she acted from desperation. Monsieur Keats, he possessed letters of sentiment, but he was no blackmailer. He is too weak, too idealistic. Major Harrington, he is brusque, yes, but poison? No, it is not his method. Sir Reginald, you inherit all, yet you did not need to press your mother. She would never disinherit you entirely. Clara, Poirot paused, watching her flinch. You had comfort, wealth, standing. To poison your mother-in-law? No, your ambitions lie in appearances, not in crime. Then his voice softened, grave, and his gaze fell upon Mortlake. But you, Monsieur Mortlake, the butler who whispered, "I must confess." Yes, you confessed, but not to negligence alone. You confessed because the weight of guilt pressed upon you. You heard the talk of blackmail, you knew the letters, you knew too much, and when Lady Eleanor resolved to resist, to write her codicil, to protect others from your influence, you silenced her. With honey, you made her drink death. The room seemed to shudder. Clara gasped. Reginald uttered a curse. Harrington made a furious step forward, then stopped, watching. Lydia's pen slipped from her hand. Mortlake did not move. Poirot advanced a step, his eyes burning with certainty. The money, £500, that was yours. She paid you already to cover some indiscretion, perhaps to secure your silence about her son or her companion. But you wanted more, and when she refused, you struck. You stole the brooch to make it appear a theft, but you dropped it in haste. You prowled the halls, whispering confessions you could not contain. The mask of loyalty hid a heart of ambition and resentment. It is you, Mortlake. You are the murderer. For a long, dreadful moment, Mortlake stood silent, his face drained of color. Then, at last, he raised his eyes, and in them was something like relief. His lips moved again, the same whisper as before. I must confess. And this time, the words rang clear, chilling the air with their finality. Mortlake's words lingered in the heavy silence, filling the room with a strange, oppressive stillness. The confession had not been shouted or proclaimed with defiance, but whispered, as if torn unwillingly from his very soul. The others stared at him with varying expressions. Shock from Clara, outrage from Reginald, suspicion edged with grim satisfaction from Harrington, and Lydia's quiet, disbelieving gaze fixed on the man she had served beside for years. Constable Barnes shifted uncomfortably, hand near his notebook, uncertain whether to step forward or wait for Poirot's command. Poirot did not rush. He let the silence press down, forcing Mortlake to feel its weight. At last, the little Belgian said softly, "So, monsieur, you do confess, but words are not enough. Tell us. Why? Let us hear from your own lips the truth you have carried in secret." Mortlake's eyes were downcast, his hands clasped before him like a penitent in church. His voice was steady, though quiet, as though speaking from a great distance. She promised me dignity in my retirement, a small annuity, enough to live out my days without shame. For 40 years I served this house, devoted my life to it, and then she spoke of delay, of reconsidering, always reconsidering. I knew Sir Reginald would never consent, nor his wife. When she hesitated again, I saw all slipping away. The money withdrawn, the £500. It was not enough. It was only a temporary reprieve. I needed certainty. I could not risk that she would change her mind. Clara gasped. "You murdered her for money, for an annuity?" Mortlake's eyes flickered to her, cold and tired. "For survival, madame. For a lifetime service to mean something in the end." Poirot raised a finger. "And yet, monsieur, there is more. You speak of survival, yes, but what of the blackmail? What of the letters? You threatened her with exposure. Exposure of what?" For the first time, Mortlake faltered. His mouth worked soundlessly before he forced the words out. "She had secrets. Letters written to Keats when he was tutor here. Innocent, perhaps, but easily twisted. I discovered them years ago. When my future seemed uncertain, I used them. I asked her to guarantee my provision. At first she yielded. Then she grew resolute, prepared to resist. That is when I acted." Keats, pale and stricken, shook his head violently. "I never meant them to be used so, I swear." Poirot silenced him with a glance. "We do not blame you, monsieur. We blame only the one who turned innocence into a weapon. Mortlake, you blackmailed your mistress. You accepted payment, and when she would not pay more, you poisoned her. Voila. The crime in all its simplicity, hidden beneath the veneer of loyalty." The room erupted, Clara sobbing into her handkerchief, Reginald shouting curses, Harrington declaring justice must be swift. Barnes stepped forward at last, his voice gruff with duty. "Mortlake, I arrest you on suspicion of murder. You'll come with me now." But Mortlake did not resist. He merely bowed his head as though relieved of a burden too long carried. "It is finished," he murmured. "At last." As Barnes led him away, Poirot remained very still, his eyes on the retreating figure. Only when the door had closed behind them did he speak again, his voice quiet but resolute. "You see, mes amis, it is always so. Murder is born not of sudden passion alone, but of desperation, pride, fear. Mortlake wished for security, and in reaching for it, he destroyed both his mistress and himself." Clara whispered. "But he served us faithfully for so many years. I cannot reconcile it." "Ah, madame," Poirot said gently, "service, loyalty, these are not shields against envy or fear. Even the most trusted may falter when confronted with loss." Reginald, his face red with anger and humiliation, muttered, "A butler, a servant, bringing disgrace upon this house. What will the county say?" Poirot fixed him with a steady gaze. "Better, monsieur, that they say truth has been revealed than that a shadow linger. Honor is not in appearances, but in justice done." Harrington gave a brisk nod, though his jaw was tight. "You've a way of making it sound inevitable, Poirot. But I wonder, had Mortlake not whispered his confession, would you still have known?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Mais oui." The pattern was clear. The money, the brooch dropped too conveniently, the honey accessible to him alone, the whispered words of guilt. Each clue pointed, and together they spoke with one voice. Lydia spoke at last, her tone subdued. "I should have seen. I worked beside him daily, but I was blind." Poirot inclined his head. "Do not reproach yourself. The guilty one always hides behind habit, behind trust. That is why they are so dangerous." The house settled into silence once more, broken only by Clara's soft weeping. Poirot allowed them their grief, their shock. Then rising, he smoothed his moustache, his eyes thoughtful. "It is finished. Justice will take its course. Lady Eleanor may rest, her secrets laid bare. But remember this, mes amis. Truth always rises, however carefully buried. Lies leave their footprints, and Hercule Poirot always sees them." He turned toward the window, where the mist was lifting, the first rays of sunlight breaking through. The grounds of Ashcombe Hall, so lately a stage for fear and suspicion, now lay serene, touched with gold. Poirot gazed upon them a moment, then, with a small sigh, adjusted his cuffs and prepared for departure. "Messieurs, mesdames," he said softly, "my task here is done. The murderer is unmasked, the mystery resolved. It remains only for you to rebuild the order that was broken. For me, there is always another puzzle, another shadow to illuminate. Such is the work of Hercule Poirot." With that, he took up his valise, perfectly polished shoes clicking on the marble floor, and left Ashcombe Hall behind, the echo of his words lingering in the silence he left. And in that silence, the household understood that nothing, not wealth, nor rank, nor loyalty, was proof against the relentless eye of the little Belgian detective. The air within Ashcombe Hall had grown lighter, though sorrow still lingered like the faint scent of lavender that clung to Lady Eleanor's boudoir. Morlake's arrest had removed the oppressive shadow, yet the house felt subdued, as though aware of the scar left by betrayal. Poirot remained only long enough to see order restored, for his work was never to dwell, but to resolve. He sat with Clara and Sir Reginald in the drawing-room one last time, the fire burning brightly against the grey afternoon. Clara, her eyes reddened but her composure intact, asked softly, "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot reconcile it. Mortlake, he lived among us, dined with us, cared for our affairs as though they were his own. Was he truly so cold as to plot her death?" Poirot spread his hands gently. "Non, madame, not cold, desperate. He feared the years of service would end in poverty. He chose a wicked path to secure his comfort. It is always so. Crime is not born of strength, but of weakness. Yet in his weakness, he showed cunning enough to weave lies. He placed poison where only trust would conceal it. But the little grey cells, they see past lies. They saw his confession, not of loyalty, but of guilt." Reginald, still restless, muttered, "He shamed us. The Ashcombe name will be tarnished." Poirot shook his head. "The shame is not yours, monsieur. It is his. Your mother died because she sought to resist him, to keep her honor intact. That is what must be remembered." Lydia Vale, who had stood silently until then, stepped forward. "I wronged myself by hiding those papers. I feared suspicion would fall on me. But I see now that concealment is as dangerous as guilt." Poirot gave her a small nod of approval. "To hide is to deceive, and deception always clouds justice. But you, mademoiselle, will learn. Lady Eleanor wished to provide for you, and in time I believe her intention will be honored." At that, Clara reached for Lydia's hand, a gesture of reconciliation, and the younger woman accepted it with quiet grace. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels on gravel signaled the constable's departure with his prisoner. Harrington, returning from the door, said with gruff finality, "Well, it's over. The law will see to him now. Let us put it behind us." Poirot rose, smoothing his mustache one last time, his small figure casting a long shadow in the firelight. "No, Major, one never truly puts such things behind. One learns. The tragedy of Lady Eleanor teaches that even in the most ordered household, there are cracks, And it is in those cracks that despair, ambition, and fear may take root. Remember this, mes amis. Order must be kept not only in houses, but in hearts. He took up his hat and valise, pausing at the door. His eyes softened as he regarded the family, united now not in suspicion but in grief tempered with understanding. Justice has been done, and though justice cannot restore life, it can bring peace. That, at least, Lady Eleanor shall have. With a small bow, Poirot stepped into the hall. The servants watched him go, their faces a mixture of awe and relief. Outside, the mist had lifted entirely, and the lawns of Ashcombe stretched clear beneath a pale autumn sun. The detective walked down the steps, his shoes shining, his stride brisk, the picture of order amid a world still prone to chaos. And as the carriage bore him away, Hercule Poirot allowed himself a small smile. Another puzzle solved, another life's dark corners illuminated. The world, for now, was once more in balance.